The alien craft drifted silently through the void, its scanners sweeping in steady pulses as they washed across the human warship with invasive precision. Aboard the Verian scout vessel, the crew had spent decades observing humanity from afar, tracking their violent conflicts, reckless colonization, and their stubborn refusal to bend before the galactic order. They had witnessed the crude arsenal humans once relied on: metal projectiles, primitive energy bolts, nuclear detonations that were laughably weak compared to the armaments of true stellar civilizations. Time and again, they had dismissed humanity as savage, too ruled by emotion, too mired in chaos to ever pose a serious danger. Yet, as the latest readings flickered across their consoles, dread spread through the Verian bridge. "Captain?" one officer stammered, his spined crest trembling. Flattening his crest in alarm, the officer repeated, "You must see this." High Captain Zorth advanced to the console, his yellow eyes narrowing as he scanned the incoming data. What he read sent an icy shiver down his spine. The human warship, designation Indomitable, was unlike any craft the Verians had ever catalogued. It was not a ship so much as a floating fortress, a weaponized colossus that broke every established principle of warfare. Its hull was no standard alloy, but an exotic composite layered to absorb and redirect energy fire. The plating was thick, unreasonably so, built to endure a siege of near-apocalyptic scale, and its arsenal. Zorth's throat constricted as his gaze lingered on the readings. Studying the analysis, Zorth's dread deepened. Indomitable bristled with a nightmarish arsenal, rail cannons capable of launching slugs at relativistic velocity, plasma lances that could carve through the thickest hulls in mere seconds, and then the missiles, thousands of them, armed not with simple explosives, but with warheads that warped space itself, unraveling shields and armor as though they were parchment. Yet even that was not the true terror. No, the real horror lay within the ship's secondary systems. The humans had crafted weapons not just to shatter vessels, but to hunt the crews within. Boarding drones armed with monomolecular blades and viral intrusion codes, nanite swarms designed to consume flesh and steel without distinction, and worst of all, the so-called exotroopers, cybernetic abominations forged from their own fallen, rebuilt into walking arsenals capable of reducing entire cities to ruin. The Verian officer's skin drained pale. This isn't a warship, High Captain. It's a nightmare given form. Zorth's throat tightened, but he could not tear his gaze away. Humans had always fought like cornered predators, clawing and biting with whatever tools they possessed. They recognized no limits, no restraint, and now they had forged a warship that embodied that ruthless savagery in metal and fire. A chilling truth struck him. For cycles, the Galactic Union had argued whether to integrate humanity or erase them before they could rise to power. Too many had laughed them off as insignificant. That had been a grave miscalculation. The humans had not been idle. They had been sharpening their teeth for war. Now they stood ready. Zorth forced down the knot in his throat and gave a single order. "Cut the scanners. Power down weapons. Prepare transmission." One officer hesitated. "What shall I report to High Command?" Zorth exhaled, trembling. "Tell them. We must never provoke the humans." Humans. The word echoed unspoken as silence blanketed the bridge of the Verian scout ship. High Captain Zorth fixed his 4 eyes on the abomination drifting ahead. The Indomitable floated motionless in the void, a predator biding its time, its presence pressing on the crew like a storm about to break. His officers obeyed without hesitation, cutting weapons and halting all scans, but the act was meaningless. The Terran warship had already noticed. A ripple of energy shimmered across its armored hull, like a beast flexing its muscles. Then the bridge shuddered with a sudden transmission, slicing through their comms with brutal clarity. The voice that followed was harsh, mechanical, yet undeniably human. Unidentified vessel. You have scanned a Terran warship. State your purpose, immediately. Every Verian on the bridge froze. Their stealth fields had never been pierced before. No species had ever seen through their cloaks. But the humans had. And they were watching. Unwelcome. That much was clear. Zorth's mind spun. One wrong word, one misstep, and this ship, this thing, would erase them without effort. He forced his spines flat against his neck, masking his fear, and gestured sharply to his communications officer. Open a channel. Under no circumstance show hostility. A sharp click filled the bridge as the link engaged. Zorth steadied his voice. This is High Captain Zorth of the Verian Exploration Fleet. We mean no harm. Our intent was merely observation. For a long, suffocating moment, silence answered him. Then the human voice returned, colder than before. Observing, huh? The word dripped with something alien to Verian ears. Mockery. Let me guess. You thought we wouldn't notice. Thought your precious cloaking tricks made you invisible. A pit of dread tightened in Zorth's chest. The humans had seen right through them. That was not our intention. He lied smoothly. We monitor many civilizations in this sector. Yours is simply of interest. Another silence, heavier this time, then their sensors shifted in alarm. The Indomitable was awakening. Its engines flared, burning with a power that defied reason, its weapons humming as they cycled through readiness checks. Targeting locks snapped into place, not one but dozens, enveloping the Verian ship in a net of death. Each firing solution mapped out their escape vectors, every possible evasive maneuver accounted for. If the humans chose to fire, there would be no survival. Then the voice returned, sharper than steel. I suggest you find another civilization to spy on. The words were a warning, but beneath them pulsed a darker promise. Zorth's jaw tightened. He had misjudged the humans. Worse, so had the entire Galactic Union. These beings were not climbing toward power. They already stood upon its summit, and now they chose to let him live. Understood, Zorth replied with careful precision. We will depart immediately. A long pause followed. Then, at last, the human's voice softened just slightly. Good choice, now run along. Little scout, and next time remember who owns this sector. The transmission cut Zorth wasted. No time, get us out of here now. The Verian ship spun away, activating its jump drive, vanishing. Into the void, as the stars streaked past them, Zorth allowed himself a slow, shuddering breath. Humanity wasn't just dangerous. They were something else entirely, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Verian scout ship emerged from the jump light, years away from the terrifying presence of the Indomitable. High Captain Zor had expected to feel relief upon their escape, but the sensation never came. Instead, a sickening weight settled in his chest. His claws drummed against the armrest of his command chair as he turned to his communications officer. Send an encrypted transmission to High Command. They must hear of this. Immediately, the officer hesitated. Captain, what do we tell them? Zorth exhaled slowly. The truth. The humans are not what we thought they were. The transmission took only moments to encode and send, and then all they could do was wait. The bridge crew remained tense, their eyes flickering toward the sensor readouts every few minutes, as if expecting the Indomitable to somehow appear here behind them. Zorth couldn't blame them. It was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission the Galactic Union had dismissed. Humanity ASA lower-tier Civilization 1 with potential, but ultimately insignificant, aggressive, yes, dangerous. Perhaps, but nothing that the greater empires couldn't handle. If the need ever arose, they had been wrong horribly. Horribly wrong. Minutes stretched into hours before the reply from High Command arrived. When it did, Zorth almost wished it hadn't. The message was direct. You are ordered to report to the War Council immediately. Cease all further missions. The humans must be evaluated. Zor felt his blood turn cold. The War Council only existential. Threats were brought before the War Council. The last time they had convened in full force was during the rise of Thuar Hive, a parasitic species that had consumed entire star systems before being purged from the galaxy, and now humanity was being placed in the same category. Zorth turned to his crew. Prepare for another jump. We return home at once. As the ship powered up, he allowed himself one final glance at the void. Beyond the viewport for centuries, the Rothans had believed themselves masters of strategy, warriors of supreme intelligence. But for the first time in his life, Zorth felt like a prey animal, and he knew with absolute certainty that humanity had become the apex predator of the galaxy. The worst part, they hadn't even begun to show their true strength yet. The Verian capital, World Zal-Torath, gleamed beneath the twin suns as High Captain Zor's scout ship descended towards the military command complex. Towering spires of obsidian and steel loomed over the landing bay, their surfaces adorned with the banners of the War Council, a symbol of order, strategy, and absolute power. Normally, such an audience would be granted only to the highest-ranking warlords of the Royan Dominion. The fact that he, a mere scout commander, had been summoned to stand before them meant only one thing. Ere the War Council was afraid. Zorth stepped off his ship. His boots clicking against the polished onyx floor, he marched through the corridor flanked by honor guards until he reached the towering doors of the council chamber. As they swung open, he was greeted by the sight of the 13 warlords who governed the Dominion. At the center of the chamber sat Grand Warlord Torva. Known. He exhaled slowly, trying to suppress the primal fear curling in his gut. He needed confirmation. He needed proof. And that meant one thing: he had to speak to the humans deep inside human space aboard. The warship Indomitable. Captain Elias Grant stood in the dim glow of the bridge watching the tactical display. High's officers moved efficiently around him, monitoring ship diagnostics and sensor feeds. But his attention remained locked on one particular anomaly. A lone Royan vessel had entered human space. No escort, no weapons primed, no signs of aggression. Brave. His first officer muttered, arms crossed or desperate. Grant smirked, maybe both. He leaned forward, opened a channel. A moment later, the view screen flickered to life and Zor's hardened visage appeared. His reptilian features were tense, his yellow eyes flickering with something Grant rarely saw in Rothan's uncertainty. Captain Grant, Zor began, his voice measured. We need to talk. Grant tilted his head. Do we? Zorth didn't flinch. I have seen the wreckage. I know what you're building your ships for. I know there is something out there. His claws tapped against his console, and I know you've been hiding it from the rest of the galaxy. The bridge went silent. Grant let out a slow breath, rubbing his jaw. Then he motioned for his officers to mute outgoing audio. Well, his first officer whispered, "There goes the secret." Grant nodded, eyes narrowing at the screen. The Rothans were smart, but he hadn't expected them to figure it out this quickly. It complicated things. The truth was, humanity hadn't just found the wreckage, they had encountered the things that caused it, and they knew that sooner or later the war that had destroyed those ancient ships would come knocking at their door. Humanity's rapid militarization, their reluctance to expand the relentless production of warships like the Indomitable, it was all preparation they weren't interested in. Galactic conquest. They weren't trying to dominate the known species. They were trying to survive. Grant unmuted the channel and met Zor's gaze. You want answers? He said, fine. But once I tell you the truth, there's no going back. Zor's expression didn't waver. I understand. Grant exhaled. All right. Then, let me tell you about the things in the dark. Grant stood in the dim glow of his command chamber, staring at the encrypted files on his terminal. The classified reports contained data that no species outside of humanity had ever seen. Until now, ZV sat across from him, his reptilian features impassive. But Grant could see the tension in his posture. The Rothan had spent his life believing his people were the apex predators of the galaxy. That illusion was about to be shattered. Grant leaned forward, fingers interlocked. We first picked up strange signals near the edges of explored space about 80 years ago. At first we thought they were just stellar anomalies, background noise, but then ships started disappearing. Zor's eyes narrowed. Pirates? Grant shook his head. That's what we thought, until we found the wrecks. He tapped the console, and the holo projector flickered to life. Distorted images appeared. Twisted metal, shattered holes, enormous scars along the remains of ships that had been torn. Part by something some of the damage looked like energy weapon fire, but much of it didn't. Some ships had been peeled open like fruit. Others had been ripped apart on a molecular level. Zor's spines flattened. This was not war. This was extermination. Grant nodded. We sent scout teams to investigate. The first few never came back. His expression darkened. The owns that did weren't the same. The images shifted again this time, showing something worse footage from the helmets of exploration teams. The camera feeds were shaky, flickering, but the sounds were unmistakable. Screams, gunfire, and then just before the feed cut, an inhuman shriek that sent ice crawling up Zor's spine. What did you find? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Grant exhaled. At first we thought it was an old war, some long-dead civilization that wiped itself out. But then he hesitated. Then they woke up, the footage changed again, showing a grainy, long-distance recording a human patrol fleet had encountered something moving through the debris field. At first it seemed like just another derelict ship floating lifelessly in the void until it moved. Zor's claws tightened as he watched. The derelict was enormous. A ship larger than any Dreadnought he had ever seen, covered in jagged shifting plates of some organic metal hybrid. It pulsed like a living thing, and as the human ships approached, the entire structure unfolded. Dozens of appendages extended, some bristling with weaponry, others ending in grotesque claw-like structures. The footage zoomed in on one of the whole breaches, and Zor felt genuine horror as he saw them. Figures, twisted, elongated forms that used to be something else. Some bore remnants of armor plating from unknown civilizations. Others still had tattered uniforms, trophies of species that had been assimilated. Then the attack began. There, corded in, dissolved into chaos. The human fleet opened fire, but the entity moved like nothing Zorth had ever seen it. Adapted energy beams bent away from its surface, kinetic rounds dissolved. Before impact, and when it struck back, the human ships didn't just explode, they withered their holes, corroding in an instant, their crews screaming as the very air inside their vessels turned against them. The recording cut. Silence filled the room. Zor's voice was horror when he finally spoke. You survived. Grant leaned back, barely rubbed his temples. That was the first encounter we lost, an entire fleet just trying to escape. He glanced at the Rothan. We call them the Erebus. We don't know if that's their real name. Hell, we don't know if they even have names. Zorth exhaled shackily. And you've been fighting them ever since? Grant nodded. Not just fighting. Preparing. His jaw tightened. We don't know how many of them are out there. We don't know if they have a home world or if they just exist, drifting through the void, consuming everything in their path. But we do know one thing. He locked eyes with his Zorth. There coming. Zor sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the horrors he had just witnessed. The Erebus, a name that meant nothing yet, carried the weight of something ancient, something unstoppable he had spent his life believing. The Royan Dominion was the pinnacle of galactic power, that they dictated the fate of lesser species. Now he realized how blind they had been and how utterly unprepared. The room remained eerily quiet, save for the hum of the Indomitable systems. Captain Grant watched him carefully, gauging his reaction. Finally, Zorth found his voice. You should have told the Galactic Union. His words were slow, deliberate. They needed to know. Grant let out a dry chuckle. And what would they have done? Captain dismissed us, called us paranoid, told us we were fear-mongering. He leaned forward, his blue eyes cold or worse. They would have panicked. Zorth opened his mouth to argue, but Grant was right. The Galactic Union was bloated, slow-moving. Every major decision required centuries of deliberation, endless political maneuvering if the humans had revealed the Erebus threat. Too soon, the Union would have either ignored them or thrown fleets at the unknown enemy without understanding what they were fighting. Both outcomes would have led to disaster. Zorth exhaled. Sharply, so instead you prepared in secret. Grant nodded. We built warships like the Indomitable. We stopped expanding and started fortifying every new colony. Was another fortress, every outpost a forward defense station. His expression darkened, because we don't know when the Erebus will arrive in full force. Only that they will. Zor's claws curled against the table. The Rothans prided themselves on their military superiority. But against this enemy, against an intelligence that adapted in real time, that absorbed the biology and technology of everything. It consumed. They wouldn't last a month. None of them would. A chilling thought crossed his mind. Have the Erebus reached your inner worlds yet, Grant? Silence was answer enough. Zorth felt his blood run cold. How long do you have, Grant? Exhaled, rubbing his temples. If our projections are right, his voice was quiet. Maybe a decade. Maybe less a decade. 10 years before the sky burned, Zorth straightened his mind, already racing. If he returned to the Dominion with this knowledge, the War Council would listen. They had to. If they didn't, they would be signing their own extinction, but that wouldn't be enough. The Dominion alone could not stop this. The Galactic Union had to be warned. Every species, every fleet, every soldier had to prepare. He met Grant's gaze. You let me leave before, Captain. That was a warning, a show of power. He inhaled deeply. Now I'm asking you to let me leave again, but this time so I can fight. Grant studied him for a long moment, then slowly he nodded. Then you better move fast, Captain, he said, because time is running out. As the Verian ship left human space, Zorth sat in his command chair, staring out at the void he had come seeking. Intelligence he had found a nightmare, and now the greatest war in history was about to begin. Not between empires, not between species, but between life and the thing that had come to race it. Zor's ship tore through the void, heading straight for the heart of the Verian Dominion. He had no time to waste. Every second spent debating, every moment of hesitation brought the Erebus closer to the inevitable slaughter. He had to make the War Council understand, had to make them believe. But even as the stars streaked past his viewport, doubt gwed at him. Would they listen? Would the Dominion, proud and arrogant, accept that they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy, that the war they had spent centuries preparing for the war against humans was meaningless in the face of the true enemy? He clenched his jaw. It didn't matter if they didn't believe him. He would make them believe, because the alternative was unthinkable. 1 week later, Royan War Council Chamber. Zorth stood before the gathered warlords, his claws pressed against the cold metal war table. The chamber was filled